and they make an action on their phone without realizing that actually they are losing money. So again, trying to make sure that people really understand these consumer risks, I think it's very, very important. I don't know if it's common here. I can share just about 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago in Zambia, I received a message which says you have received 350 kwacha from somebody. So that message, normally, you get it from Airtel. So it always comes as an Airtel message, in Airtel money. But this time it came with a number. So for me, automatically I knew that this is one of them. So it says you've received 350. So just a minute from the time the SMS came, I received a call from the same number. Oh, sir, good morning. We have sent you 350 kwacha by mistake. Please just send us 300 and you can keep the 50 kwacha, And this is real, I was busy on my desk working, and I was like, then I actually, for me, when so I just blocked the number and then used my other line to say, please watch, you actually be caught up, Sent a message using another number, but blocked the other number. But believe you me, when I was sharing my story to my colleague, a person who works for Zicta. Now, Zicta is the authority in Zambia which regulates telcos and all this money. She had a similar situation, and she works for the authority. And because she was busy, she sent the money. She was saying it coincided, someone who needed to send money and sent the money. But of course, because she works for Zicta, they managed to catch the culprit. But how many people can be swindled? So I think when we talk about consumer rights, I think let's be real that there are these risks. And before, I don't know what risks might be here, but I think those are some of the examples of risks. Then the final one, of course, focus on the vulnerable ones, but not limited to the people that are living in rural areas, young people, and entrepreneurs working in the formal sector. This is, of course, based on those indexes. So I'll pause there just for a few questions. And if you ask me any questions that I'm going to cover in the strategy, I'll just mention that I'll cover it. But if it's a clarification of what I've presented so far, I'll do that. So feel free to ask at this point before we transition. Yes, there's a question. You see the genesis of these indexes. You'll see that at the very beginning there were a few questions, but with time people began to say, we found out this, but we didn't find out this, so let's try to separate. Yeah. Okay. One more question before we proceed. Okay. Going once, twice?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. One, yes.
Thank you so much. From a financial institution, and I don't know if you can just slide back a little bit. On the slide where people prefer to get financial education.
Let's skip it. Huh? I skipped it?
You did, but we can just...
This one?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, in-person group-based training, most of the people preferred that strategy. But when I read it in the banking sector, I find out that it's a little bit challenging because we don't really serve a lot of segments in groups. Probably it's like quite a small number if in associations, in cooperatives. So I'm just wondering, how can we do that and use that same strategy in the banking sector. Do you have any experience between on maybe different countries, or you can advise?
I think very good questions. And I did mention that if we're all sitting here and wanted to say, okay, fine, let's decide what is the most cost effective. Most of us will be looking at not something other than group, okay, because we know it's costly, okay? And because of that, but this is what the market is saying. So if, again, you are sitting in the bank, you're sitting in the insurance company, and you're asking yourself, how do we effectively reach people? You say, okay, fine, let's be customer-centric. And you go out and do what we did, ask people, and they will still tell you that we want to be taught like that. There are ways of doing it cost-effectively, and I'll give some examples. So one example I'll give from individual institution. I'll give one from the insurance sector, Holland in South Africa. So Holland in South Africa, they developed what they call the emerging customer. So the emerging customer, I think we have seen it now, almost all the banks, they have a department which they call the emerging customer. So all you want is to say, how do we begin to grow our business with those that we don't serve? So they are becoming the emerging customer. So what they did when they set up that unit, they also set up what they call the knowledge and learning department. So first insurance actually I came across with that department. That department designed programs which they called streetwise. They would go out in the communities and do exactly that. Invite people to an hour session to play a game. That game was called Streetwise. And that game was a financial education tool. Streetwise simply means that how do you make money smart solutions? And it will teach people how to borrow, how to manage debt, how much you should borrow, when should you take insurance. And they were doing that before they can actually sign up anyone as a client. So the hypothesis was that if we do that, then we'll try to measure if someone has gone through that initiative and becomes our client, how long they'll stay. Now, everyone will tell you that one of the challenges in the insurance sector is that the first sign-up is easy. And if the risk doesn't occur, you begin to question, why did I pay this premium and nothing happened? Year 1, year 2, year 3. What Holland proved was that most of the customers that went through that financial education stayed longer with them than those that didn't. So again, if you are looking at a business case, the business case is there. You can actually try to use some very quick, sort of initiatives and innovative initiatives to make it work. But don't look at quick return on investment. Look at long term. So if you are really thinking about having an impact, you have to convince your shareholders that let's do this and start building our emerging customers, but we are building them for a long term and not short term. Yeah. I could give more examples. We can go off, like there are so many examples of people that are actually doing that. Anything else? Okay, we can proceed. So I'll now go straight into the strategy, and you'll see that what the strategy does now is to basically build on what we found in the FinCap. And for most of you that attended the meeting with Danielle, my colleague, you actually contributed to this framework. So actually it's a framework that was born from your recommendation. So what does the strategy do? I think when you switch them off, but yeah, slightly better. So it will set up the framework for improving financial capabilities of People in Rwanda, it aims to empower people in Rwanda with knowledge, skills, understanding, motivation, and confidence, which is where we started from with Dr. Moise. And then, of course, will be implemented over a 5-year period, and it has recommended some financial education programs to be implemented for those target groups. This is a nice summary, and we were talking about this just this morning. It is a nice summary if you just wanted to say, what is this strategy about? What is it going to cover? What's the mission? This is with a one-page summary of the strategy. Of course, the vision is to build financial capability, to build an inclusive, financially literate Rwandan society. That's the vision. And if it can be achieved in 5 years, well and good. If it can be achieved in 10 years, well and good as well. But of course, what we are going to strive in any initiative that you are going to start implementing now until 2027, we want to make sure that when we measure those financial capability indexes, they'll change. Of course, the mission is to empower people so that they can make informed financial decisions, and financial decisions both in terms of how they manage their finances, but also how they use the financial services available to them. In terms of the thrust, which is the core competences that we'll be looking at, I think I mentioned this already, from lifetime skills to consumer rights and responsibility, and of course using traditional and digital financial services, and building resilience as well, and changing the mindset in terms of planning horizon, that people begin to focus on long term. When it comes to the pillars now, this is where the strategy now begins to come in. What are the objectives and the pillars? The first one is to engage stakeholders and establish a coordinating mechanism, and we have a recommendation in the strategy and the roles of different stakeholders to raise awareness of the program through a multi-channel approach. So recall that from your question, we're saying this is what people want. They are looking at in person, but what we are recommending in this strategy is multi-channel. I think tailored to each target market segment, but of course, at the back of our mind, we know that if we want to have massive reach based on their insights, then we might want to invest in some group in-person training as well. Of course, the third one is to design program tools for different target market segments, and also build the capacity in the tools, provide financial education to the targeted market segments, provide ongoing collaboration and support, and then conduct monitoring and evaluation and learning of the program. So this is more like the pillars of the strategy, which really are summarized with those 7 aspects there. Core competences, this is just to recap. I think I've already talked about this. They remain the 5 aspects that we found from the FinCap. Target market segments, again, we talked about this already. Now, in terms of the spectrum of looking at core competences, we know, I think this is also related to the question that you gave. It's really all of them: money management, planning for the future, building resilience, using and evaluating financial services, use and evaluate digital financial services, consumer protection, and investing. Again, it's just to summarize that when we are looking at trying to develop programs, we should be looking at all these core competencies. Of course, we know that there is resilience and savings and investments that emerged as the lowest competencies, but we should really still be providing a comprehensive programs. In terms of budgeting and financing guidelines, of course, there's still some discussion ongoing on this one. What we did, and this is based on experience, our strong recommendation is budgets should be ideally developed with the technical working groups of each of those pillars that we're going to talk about. But this survey, we tried to find out what would be the cost of reaching people using different tools. So you can see here, if we have to use interactive voice and recording, we would be spending about $3 to $4 per person. If we had to do the in-person, which is their preference for community-based trainers, maybe run some TOTs and then send people, we would be spending slightly more, $7.50 or $8. And then if you are going to do some staff training and then get those staff to actually train, you're spending about 15. And this per person is per person reached. Now this is a guide. If we were to say, let's develop a budget, okay? If it was one institution that says, I want to develop a budget for financial education, and we'll have all the three aspects. One rule you can use is simply to actually multiply this. Of course, there will be variations based on your cost structures, and we don't have privilege of some of the cost structures, in terms of how much people get, in financial institutions. But you can also use this. But what this tells you, you know what is cheap, you know what is medium, and you know what might be very expensive, and then it actually conforms to what we say. But it's a very good guide when it comes to developing budgets and what you want to reach. Okay, in terms of governance, and maybe before I do this, I think I'll come back to this, but I think I want to start from here. Yeah, and let me start from here, and then I'll go back because the context will be better. So for leadership, what we thought would be most ideal is this structure. And for those that attended the meeting with Danielle, again, we are part of the group that actually came up with this structure. So what that means is that at the top here, we have a joint financial sector development committee, which is the National Bank and of course the Ministry of Finance there. And then down here, we have a financial education strategy technical committee. And then we have now the working groups here. And the working groups recommended are 4, one focusing on children and youth, and then that would be covering the in and out of school, both youth and children. And then you have the gender working committee, focusing on these target market segments. And then you have the rural and refugee working group, focusing on that. And then you have the adults and any small, medium-sized business working group focusing on that. And that's the market segment. So basically, this line you have market segments, here you have coordination, and here you have strategy oversight, and then you have coordination and technical guidance happening at this level. So, and then if you look at the roles of the steering committee, which will be up there, they will develop enabling policies to strengthen financial education. They will be in charge of coordination, database of all stakeholders, secure support from key stakeholders, and then of course you have the implementation and M&E as well. So the steering committee is also responsible for fundraising and actually looking at getting sure that programs are designed, but they're also providing oversight of the strategy. So they are the ones to actually be able to report at national level to say this is how far we've gone with the strategy. But then you have a technical committee, which is actually doing the actual coordination. So they communicate with stakeholders, they coordinate all activities, They do implementation and identify key areas, identify technical assistance and capacity building, and then they do M&E as well. Okay, so let me just briefly stop it here and see if this structure can work, because then I can go back and finish off with those specific, So what do we think? I think some of you were part of this. Do you think this would work? And can we tweak it in a different way? The background to this, of course, is that you are not building a new institution to do financial education, but all of us here are engaged using this structure. So let's say, for instance, banks who are interested in reaching farmers. So they will be represented in that working group, which is looking at rural. And for smallholder farmers, whether it's insurance, credit, or savings, then you'll be actually looking at initiatives that are supported by that working group. If you want to look at gender-smart solutions, like financial services for women, with special discounts or special attention to gender-smart solution, then of course you know that there's a working group that you can engage. And I must say these working groups are multi-stakeholder. So they are not just public, they're a combination of representatives from public and private. And when they go there, they are both contributing to ensuring that there are initiatives that are being implemented for specific programs to the target market segments, but also they have interest in actually implementing some of those initiatives as well. So I think I just wanted to get your inputs on this, because this is very critical in terms of leadership. If we can get this right, then we know that at least we can make sure that the strategy is implemented very well. So let me pause here before I go back to the other slides. Any feedback and